The touch points could be as many as 16 different touch points. So you have to kind of know what are all the different playgrounds to be in and to really kind of communicate and build an affinity with the Chinese audiences.
Hello and welcome to Bridge to Chinese Consumers. This is a video series where we speak to experts in the retail, luxury, tourism and hospitality industries. We get into the story behind our guests and their Chinese business journey. And of course, they will share their experiences, mistakes, as well as Chinese insights. Today, we have the pleasure to welcome Ying Tiun from Hylink Digital Solutions. Welcome, Ying.
Hello, Annie. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. Our guest, Ying, is the Business and Digital Director from Hylink. She comes from 15 years of experience in the US, UK, and APAC region. She has in-depth knowledge in digital strategies, communications, and marketing. And before we get started, Ying, I wanted to say congratulations first to Hylink being recognized the #1 digital marketing agency by CI Week for the 13th year in a row. That's fantastic.
Thank you, Annie. Yes, I think we're very proud of that achievement. And honestly, I think the whole team is just coming together and celebrating for that. That's great news for us too.
Can you, in your own words, describe Hylink?
Hylink, for those that a lot of people didn't know about us, but we are actually the largest independent natively Chinese digital agency, the first to move from the east to the west. Founded in 1994, and right now we have about 15 offices on the ground in China, and globally we have about 2,000 people. But one key thing I really want people to remember Hylink with is that when you think China, you think Hylink. What we do is purely China. We help brands to enter China, and that's the main thing.
Excellent. Well, Ying and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and I know, Ying, you're actually not Chinese. You're from Singapore. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So yes, I am from Singapore. I'm actually born in Malaysia, but I've never lived there. Basically, my parents popped me out and then shipped me to Singapore. So having been in Singapore working there for about 5 years, I decided it was time for me to kind of venture a little bit out of my comfort zone. I figured quite naively that because I speak Mandarin, being bilingual, just go to a huge market out there, and I went to China. And with no job offer, with nothing, not knowing anyone, moved to Shanghai. Thought I would just spend a couple of years there, and I ended up staying close to 8 years in Shanghai. So from not knowing what Baidu is to helping clients navigate the whole ecosystem, that's been quite an experience.
In your words, what is Chinese digital ecosystem?
I would say it's a massive playground for me. And why do I say that? There's a lot of fun that you can explore with all the platforms, but it is also so dynamic, so imaginative, and there's so much that one can explore. But then when it comes to the digital landscape in China, I think very often people who are not familiar with China tend to get sucked into just one particular platform that they heard of, or one particular aspect of it, when they need to be aware that when it comes to a Chinese consumer and connecting with them on the ground, the touch points could be as many as 16 different touch points. So you have to kind of know what are all the different playgrounds to be in and to really kind of communicate and build an affinity with the Chinese audiences.
That to me sounds kind of very expensive, isn't it, for a brand? So, for a medium-sized company that doesn't have big budgets, what do they need to do, and how should they do China?
I think that when someone first hears the thing like, oh, you have to be on every platform, that's very expensive, time consuming, resource heavy, etc. Now, there are clever ways to do that. And that is where, you and I will both come in to consult them on. There is a difference between own channel, paid channels. You can have your owned channel. So for example, you might want to start off with a WeChat and a Xiaohongshu, for example, if you're more of a fashion brand. Or if you are a brand that is more concerned about, say, you want to do more B2B, then is it more Zhihu? Is it more Baidu? So it's just picking the first few own channels. What are the key own channels that you need to be on? Then how do you make sure that you are on multiple channels if you don't own them? There is always media. And when I talk about media, it's not just the traditional media of newspaper, for example, but even key opinion leaders, which are the KOLs. Because KOLs are considered a media type, because it's essentially a third-party fees that you're paying them for to amplify for you. So for example, if you don't have a Xiaohongshu or a Little Red Book account, there are KOLs or KOC, key opinion consumers, whom you can work with. So then they can populate for you on their own account. So it's just making sure that your brand is visible to the consumers on a varied number of platforms, whether it's from your own channel, paid channel.
Fantastic. And in China back in 2009, and now we are in 2021, how much has the digital landscape changed when you first stepped into China?
Oh, I would say massively. I remember first going to China and going for a job interview and then asking about Baidu, and at that time I was just like, I just know it's a search engine. I don't really know any other platforms. And then from there were different emerging platforms such as at the time Kaixin, Renren, which is somewhat copying the Facebook then. But then before that, Weibo came out quite strongly. And then WeChat didn't even exist when I was there. So from that, it's just keep evolving, and it's so competitive that a lot of the platforms that I mentioned earlier, like Kaixin, Renren, may be completely obsolete right now. Not many more people are using them anymore. Chinese users and consumers are very quick to adapt new technologies, and they immerse in it very quickly as well.
Speaking about the China digital landscape, it is extremely different from where we come from the Western world. So, it's not Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are all not accessed, cannot be accessed in China. So I guess for the first point of entry for any businesses from the West, they need to be within the digital ecosystem of China. Is that correct?
Yes, that's definitely correct. I think there are definitely a lot of similarities. For example, with Google, there would be a Baidu. With Twitter, there might be a Weibo equivalent. But the one thing that China tech giants have done so well is that they have always developed the apps with the users in mind, but how can they keep engaging with the users so that they'll always be immersed with the platform? So therefore, one platform doesn't only serve one purpose. You must have heard of WeChat being the super app, and there's just so many functions embedded within it. So for Western brands that may not be familiar with the Chinese ecosystem, it's not as simple as just pegging it one-to-one. It's not saying that this is an Instagram, this is a Facebook, that there are just so many complexities around that.
I feel like China is somewhat like a buzzword, like Chinese consumers is like hashtag wow, amazing, I want to get into it. 1.4 billion people, 850 million digital consumers. It's a huge market, but it is also a very competitive and a very expensive market. And I feel there are a lot of businesses out there that kind of have a misinterpretation, right? So in your experience, for any business that are wanting to look into China or expand what they are currently offering into China, what are your advice to them and where do they start?
Well, I would kind of streamline it into two key things that I think is quite important. First of all, really identify who your target audience would be in Chinese market. If you are a brand that's already established here, you might have this information and data already to prove that, for example, your consumers here could be in the 40s and 50s, slightly more mature market. And if you're going to sell to China, you really need to deep dive into, are those the same target audience you're talking to? Because you might be surprised that your target audience could be a bit younger in China, or could be older, either way. But it's really finding out who your target audiences are and what will resonate with them. Never assume that you could apply what works for you here back in China. Second thing is really understand the fact that how Chinese consumers are very fast-paced and very quick in every aspect. And when I say that, it's really they're becoming more discerning. So they have that kind of expectations in terms of, if I buy something from you, how quick can I expect the package? How quick am I going to get a response from you from customer service perspective? If I have a complaint, is there someone coming back to me? How fast are you responding to me? But also, how quickly are you populating the digital ecosystem? So being quick, being nimble, being flexible, that is something that really is very important for the Chinese market.
You've raised 2 points there, and I want to highlight those 2 points on how important it is. Number one is trademark, and number two is having a website that is outside of the China firewall.
We have to understand that there is something called the Great Firewall of China. If someone is residing in China, very often the website may not load if it's not hosted in China. But in order to be hosted in China, you have to have an ICP license. So otherwise, you have to be hosted maybe in Hong Kong, and where you have to have a CDN network, etc. So there are ways around that. But it is so important to make sure that the website is accessible to the user. I think that is so important, the accessibility to things. So making sure at least having a mini site, if the full website is not ready, a mini site that the user could easily access from China, that is so important. And then the next part about trademark side of things, I'm not a legal expert, so I can't quite say what are the right steps that one needs to take, but I do know that it's so important to protect your brand in China. I would say the Chinese government definitely have really stepped up a lot in terms of protecting the IPs of brands in China. Great initiative, great thing that they've done. But brands need to not be naive to think that, I could enter China and then I have partners there that could help me work it out, etc., which is great. But at the same time, make sure you own everything, the rights that you have, and making sure everything is just aligned before you really enter the market.
This is something that I came across quite often. When a brand wants to enter into China, I advise them to always have a Chinese business name, right? And that brand name is so important. Like, how does it translate? What Chinese characters to use? Do you advise brands to have a Chinese business name when they do business in China?
I would say that, first of all, it would be depending on whether this brand is completely new and there's no history or connection with China before. And then what I would always recommend for the brand to do is try to do a bit of audit online first to find out what you might already be known. Because you'll be surprised. For example, Brompton bikes, they are known as Xiaobu in China. They didn't even know they had that. It's an affectionate nickname that people have called them. There might be other brands that consumers have not given a nickname. So it's really finding out from the first step if consumers have already affectionately given you a name. But then the second step, of course, would be to have that Chinese name. Because, for example, if you have a very complicated name that no one can pronounce in China, rest assured the Chinese consumer will start tagging you to a nickname which you may not like. So it's important to own that first. So making sure that you have that Chinese name registered and making sure it's populated around the different channels so that the consumers identify you with that name that you want them to know you by in China.
During COVID-19, what have you seen in the digital landscape, changed in the digital landscape in China, and what are the key trends that you are seeing that it's extremely popular?
One of those things that we all can agree with is the whole contactless. whether it's contactless payment, contactless shopping, everything to do with that. But that has definitely escalated and elevated to another level during COVID. Physical contact is minimized. So really that contactless side of things, but also a heightened interest in health, wellness, and future planning. But then also consumers are definitely looking up to have more experiences as well. So a lot of brands are catering to experiences whether it's like pop-up stores or online live streaming experiences, etc. So all of these are coming together.
Can you name one mistake that either you have made or you have seen someone else made in their Chinese business journey? And your advice to anyone that is just starting out in their Chinese business journey?
You mentioned earlier, China, the big buzzword. Everyone wants to enter the market and try to dominate and sell to the market. But then they don't realize that it is so competitive that you have to make sure that you have some of your solid foundation in place first before you stumble into it. You could be a big brand here and then you go there and think everyone would love me. Then you realize that maybe your payment doesn't work there, or sizing doesn't fit the people, the consumers there. It's all about really, first of all, doing your due diligence, finding out exactly who your target audiences are, the right platforms you should be on, and then making sure that you're China ready to enter the market, rather than to spend a lot of money setting up a lot of platforms and then you don't have the ground basics in place.
Thank you so much for your time today, and for any viewers that wish to engage with Hylink in understanding their options in China on the digital landscape, how do they get in touch with you?
Yes, they could reach out to us via our website, hylink.co.uk, or they could reach out to me via LinkedIn. Happy to connect, and also can provide my email address and LinkedIn contact.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you once again for having me. Thank you, Annie.